Welcome to Healthy Conversations, sharing the knowledge, experience, stories, and the wisdom of herbalists and other natural healers, with your host, Stephen Horn. Today's guest, Brigitte Mars. Hi, welcome to Healthy Conversations. Today, I'm with my friend again, Brigitte Mars, author of a new book, or co-author of a new book, Mental and Emotional Health. And we are talking about grief today. You told me earlier that you work helping people at the end of their lives, which is really a fascinating thing for me. And since all of us at one time or another in our life are going to have grief, we can't escape this life without losing people or things that are important to us. Let's talk about how grief affects our health and what we can do to help work through our grief. So take it away, Brigitte.
Thank you. Well, according to the principles of Asian medicine, we know that grief can affect the lungs and the large intestines. People might be very vulnerable after a grievous incident, especially if they don't take care of themselves. And so I do think there are things we can do to uplift ourselves from grief. And in my book, Natural Remedies for Mental and Emotional Health, I've got a number of ideas, and I want to share some of those with our listeners. So, it's true, it seems that grief seems to be part of life, that we are going to lose things, whether it's a pet or a parent or a child. My mother actually died a week ago.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, but, I believe in eternal life, and I'm grateful that she had a good life. But what do we do when we have grief? Well, one thing I think of is a homeopathic remedy, Ignatia. Not to be confused with echinacea, but homeopathic Ignatia is a great remedy for grief from loss. So that might be one thing to consider. And, Stephen, I sometimes marvel that, when someone does send flowers, but then a week later, you've got like 50 bunches of dead flowers and empty vases and nowhere to put them. And I think we could do a little better on helping people with grief. So some of the things that I might include in a grief relief kit might be some rescue remedy, a Bach flower remedy that most herbalists know about. You can find it at any health food store, because even though you might be grieved, you might have children to take care of. You might have to still go to work. You might have to open the restaurant in the morning and do your best. And so I'm all big on that. So homeopathic Ignatia, rescue remedy, a bottle of lavender oil. I think a great place to deal with grief is to sob in the bathtub. Fill up the bathtub, add 7 drops of lavender oil, and tell your housemates or whoever you're going to go and release some grief, because I think trying to keep it in, contributes to making us sick. Like, what do you need to get off your chest? And I do think that tears are medicine for the soul. And so expressing that grief can be very, very helpful. When I went through a very difficult period once, I would just tell my housemates, I'm going to cry. Don't come in. Don't come tell me no, don't cry. Everything's going to be okay. I just sobbed and sobbed. And you know what? Usually I give my water, I collect it in a watering can and give it to the plants on the porch because I'm super eco. But if I'm doing a grief release cry, I'm going to let the water out as I stay in the tub and just visualize all my sorrow going down the drain. That's very helpful.
I'm glad you mentioned sobbing, because I learned a very interesting thing about the grieving process from a body-centered psychologist named Alexander Lowen. When we lose something important to us, he says that love and pleasure make our blood flow to the extremities of our body and open up our senses. But when something shocks us, like learning that someone we love died or something like that happens, we have the opposite reaction. The blood retreats inward into our internal organs and the color drops out of our face. And he says the sobbing, the convulsion, not just the tears, but the letting yourself just, kind of break down, actually pushes our blood back out to the periphery of our body and allows us to feel again. Because the withdrawal is kind of this numbing thing that creates this pressure in your chest from all the blood rushing inward. And we have to let the pain out. And it's this sobbing and, crying that allows us to release it. And I think it's really bad in our culture that we say to people, don't cry, don't cry, it's okay. Well, because people need to cry.
Mm-hmm. And
And I always tell people, they start to tear up and they say, oh, I'm sorry, sorry. No, I said, it's fine. You cry. It's okay. It's okay. I'm not going to be bothered by you crying.
and
It's a good thing. Let it out.
And again, raising our little boys to say big boys don't cry or big girls don't cry, or I'll give you something to cry about. That's the thing that a lot of things were done. But,
it's awful because, yeah.
And so the sobbing is really helpful. And I love what you just shared. I totally believe that. And of course, during times of grief, we want to take especially good care of our lungs, eat our beta carotene rich foods like winter squash and carrots and sweet potatoes and pumpkin. Also using some pungent foods like onion and garlic, things that might even make us cry, help to release the tears. And if you can't cry, watch a sad movie. Sometimes you think you're crying about, Old Yeller or the Joy Luck Club or something, but it's really just giving you permission to let the tears flow. And it might start with a movie that has nothing to do with you, but you're sobbing for, the grief of humanity. And I think that's really helpful. And, a few years ago, I went through a divorce after 38 years of marriage, what I thought was a very happy marriage. And I was devastated. And I did these things, but I want to tell you the most helpful thing I did. My massage therapist said, make a list of 100 reasons why this is okay. And my best friend, whose husband died of prostate cancer, we kind of supported each other. We thought, what's good about this? This is horrible. And she started out like, well, he's not suffering anymore. Okay. And I wrote, well, I don't have to vacuum every day. And then, I wrote, I can wear pink eyeshadow if I want to. And she wrote, I can get back to doing my art. I can travel again. So we just, making that list, really helped to put it into perspective. And it might start out with just a few things, maybe God has another plan for me, or I can, have more parties and I can play my music louder, or whatever it is. It might be a really small thing, but you just start making that list. And very often, I think many of us who've gone through grief and loss, it ends up being a great teacher, and it teaches us to have compassion. I really like that. Very often you find your way out of it, and sometimes something better is just down the road, and we just have to trust in the plan. And yes, death happens, loss happens, and usually that's part of life, and we are tempered by our grief, and these emotions show us that, how to help others. One other thing I'll mention, there's a flower essence, since you like flower essences. We both do bleeding heart.
Oh yes, I love bleeding heart
essence. I love
bleeding heart and rose, bleeding heart and wild rose flower
and
essence.
Then those violet, another name for violet, and the wild relative of pansy is heart's ease. So
yes,
making violet honey and violet vinegar, putting violets on everything, and the herb motherwort. Motherwort helps. I'm quoting Susan Weed here. Motherwort mellows the sharpness of grief. It's a very bitter herb in the mint family, Leonaris cardiaca. The nature does give us herbs that are helpful. It's so beautiful to learn about this, because these things are not only good for our mental health, they're good for our physical health, and they're also good for the planet, because somewhere on the face of the earth, there's going to be bees buzzing around the lavender or whatever the plant is. Like, it really is a win-win situation. We use healing herbs and the planet wins because people are growing them and the pollinators are happy, and you're nurturing yourself. You're not just masking or covering things up.
Yeah. You mentioned about the relationship between the lungs and grief. And I've seen a number of cases where persons come to me and said, I've got this respiratory stuff and I can't get rid of it. And I keep trying all these things. And I learned to ask them a question. When did this start happening?
Mm-hmm.
And then I said, did you lose anyone close to you right before? And every single time they've said yes. In fact, one lady, what she turned out is that she had lost her husband 3 years earlier, and that every year when on the anniversary of the time when he died, she would get respiratory problems. And I say, well, did you ever give yourself time to grieve? And they said, oh no, I had to just be strong and hold on. And so we give them permission to grieve. Tell them, go sob, whatever. And you know what? The respiratory stuff clears up.
I've heard
it's really interesting.
I asked a little girl, so when did the asthma start? And she said, when my daddy went to jail. And then,
right.
So yes. And again, once we've gotten through the initial heartache of grief, it might be a good time to travel or encourage, don't do anything major like sell the house or, do something really big that you haven't really thought out, because we're still very fragile. But we know that this is part of the package deal of human life on planet Earth. And we're going to get through it, and there will be brighter days ahead. But nurturing ourselves, I think very often when people are sad or depressed, they often take worse care of themselves. But when you're really grieved, it might be the time like, no, you need to get a massage. You need to go visit the hot springs. You need to, go on a little trip to clear the slate. And very often, I think that there's ways that we can, really look at what are the benefits, that I learned something from this experience, from this person, from this pet, from this love. And now the universe is saying there's something else ahead, and you get to choose to help create it. You get to write the rest of the script as best you can.
Yeah, I remember when I lost a 2-month-old child to sudden infant death syndrome. I had worked with a lot of people who were grieving, and I knew if I stuffed this inside, I'd never get over it. So I let myself several occasions break down and sob and cry. And it takes a period of time. Sometimes it takes 6 months or a year where you're periodically going to cry and you're going to feel bad and whatever, but just go through it. But after 6 months, I had this amazing thing. I realized that everything I loved, I had no guarantee it was going to be there tomorrow. And I decided I had only one option, and that was to appreciate it today. Mm-hmm. And so I have to say that grief taught me to be grateful for everything that I have, and to live each day with just embracing that fully, rather than trying to protect myself from losing things, instead to appreciate it all while I have it. And it was interesting because shortly after that, both my mom and my dad died, but I had gotten to be closer to them and, spent more time with them. And I didn't feel as deep a loss because I had loved them more while I had them. Mm. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I thank you for sharing that. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. I really love the remedies and things we're talking about with grief, because I think a lot of people, can benefit by understanding how to deal with grief and how to go through the process. And you can learn more from the book, Mental and Emotional Health. We'll put a link to it in the description below, as well as some information on how to contact Brigitte. And hopefully we'll have a chance to do this again, because there's a whole lot more I'd like to talk with you about.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for being with us.
And Stephen, the book's actually called Natural Remedies for Mental and Emotional Health.
The natural remedies for... There it is.
Natural remedies.
And
again,
health.
It's food, it's herbs, it's essential oils, it's flower essences. So there you go. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Yeah.
Thanks for
Oh, you're very welcome.
Many blessings to all of you.
Hit the like button and subscribe to our channel to catch future episodes of Healthy Conversations. Help us educate others by sharing this video, and please feel free to share your own thoughts, comments, and questions below. To learn more, check out the links below.